Welcome back. Thank you for clicking on this video. We are talking NFL Week 5, Thursday Night Football, Tampa Bay Bucs at Atlanta Falcons. Now, according to the YouTube analytics, I've been getting a lot of first-time viewers on these videos recently, so if this is your first time watching one of my game breakdowns, how I approach breaking down these games, it's from a sports betting perspective, and I try to do it in two parts. First is what I call game theory. This is something everyone's familiar with. It's simply how I think the game will be played out. The on-field matchup, talent, coaching, weather, scheduling, etc., etc. The second part is what I try to focus a bit more on, and I call this market analysis. This is more about the line movement, or what I refer to as the life cycle of a betting line, from the look-ahead line up until the closing line, finding patterns of when sportsbooks adjust their lines and what type of sportsbooks adjust and when they do it. In my experience, every bettor has an understanding of game theory. There's tons of people that can list off all the stats for players and teams, but a lot fewer that have an understanding on how to analyze the betting market. This is why market analysis is a big focus of what I do inside the Betting Network Discord community. If you want to hear a bunch of player stats and trends that are already known by the odds makers and already factored into the point spreads, you can go watch ESPN. They have a ton of that stuff. In these videos that I'm doing, I'm trying to help anyone watching find an edge. If it's not something they can capitalize on this week, then it's something they can use and take advantage of next week. Remember, one of the main goals in sports betting is we want to try and find things that aren't being factored into the spreads by the odds makers, or into the money lines or totals or whatever, or find something that's not being factored in enough or too little, or I should say, or too much. Knowing a team is 6-1, their last 7 against the spread is useless. Trust me, sportsbooks know it and have already factored it in, so knowing it means nothing. And actually, they've probably factored it in too much, thinking bettors will look at that as a positive for that 6-1 against the spread team. So in that fake example, you'd probably be better off betting against that 6-1 team. But enough about all that. Sometimes I get carried away and forget I'm here to talk about an actual game. Bucs at Falcons. Falcons at the time of this recording are small favorites of 1.5 points with a total of 43.5. Couple 44s starting to show on the screen here. Keep in mind, 44 is a key number for NFL totals, so if you're betting the over, you obviously want to try to get 43.5, and you obviously want 44 if you're looking on the under. Now, on the screen, if we look at the opening column there, we can see Atlanta opened -2. But a week ago, this line was Atlanta -3 on what's called the look-ahead line. Both teams then go out on Sunday. They win and cover the spread in both their games, but by Monday, just a couple days ago, Atlanta is now down to -1.5, and this is a pretty big move. It might only be 1.5 points, but you consider home favorites of 3 points, which we know 3 is a very key number and common outcome, especially for home favorites. I think they land something like 12% of the time by 3 points. Now we want to figure out why this spread went from 3 to 1.5. Is it because of injuries? Is it because of sharp betting action? I don't think it's because of any of that. I think it's based on lopsided bets on the Bucs related to how these two teams are being perceived right now. On the surface, if we just look at the outcomes from last week, the Bucs are coming off the more impressive win, at least by margin of victory. But is it really the more impressive win? Eagles are a decent enough team, but the Eagles mailed that game in. With their bye week on deck, they opted to sit out several key starters that were dealing with injury, but those players probably could have played if it was a more meaningful game, which tells you the Eagles' mindset entering that game last week. So I think we might have a little recency bias here, which is showing itself in this line movement. I have this game power rated at basically Atlanta -1.5, so I think the current line of Atlanta -1.5 is where we see this close, so there's no urgency to bet this. I don't think it's going to go back up to 3 or down to a pick'em. And of course, my number is pretty close to where the current line is. Based on my power ratings of this game, if it was to be played on a neutral field, I'd have the Bucs favored by 0.5 point. But that number still has to be adjusted for several factors like injury, situation, and of course, home field advantage. So after adjusting, I come up with Atlanta minus 1.5, which of course doesn't give me line value against the current line, but could probably bump it up a little for this situation. And I've talked about this every Thursday night game preview so far. Short week, both teams having just played on Sunday, but the road team is typically at a bigger disadvantage because the week is even shorter for them with a day of travel lost. Not that going from Tampa Bay to Atlanta is some grueling traveling spot, but you're still not sleeping in your own bed. You're away from your own facilities. But in general, home field advantage has meaned less and less in recent years. It used to be home field advantage was worth close to 3 points, or definitely 2.5. But there's some situations now where I barely give the home team 1 point. So not sure you can really give much more than a 1 point bump for home field advantage in this spot for the Falcons. If it was like a dome team traveling to play outdoors in bad weather, that'd be like a different story. But Tampa Bay is definitely the more banged up team in this matchup as far as injuries go. They have a long injury report, but I marked the players in red there that I think will be officially ruled out on the Wednesday injury report. Bucs have already been without Kalijah Cansey, one of their best tackles, and then their best safety, Antoine Winfield. But offensively for the Bucs, there is some concerns. Starting tackle Luke Godecki, both wide receivers Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer, both are expected to miss. It's not good to have an injury report this long, especially on a short week with a quick turnaround, 3-day rest with guys banged up. On the other side for the Falcons, the only notable injury is with their middle linebacker, Troy Anderson. He's the only one that I think looks like he'll not play, as he's got 2 straight DNPs, did not participate. He's an impact player too, 17 tackles versus the Saints last week. Bijan Robinson popped up on the injury report. He's going to play, though. Every running back one is going to be limited or did not play on Monday or Tuesday. So I actually recorded a video on how to read injury reports. I'll post that at some point this week. And something I always look for with injuries is which players will benefit from injuries or how teams will take advantage of opposing team injuries. We know Tampa Bay is a little thin at wide receiver with both their number 3 and number 4 wide receiver options likely to miss. This is probably common sense here, but you can find value identifying the backups or who'll get increased playing time because they're filling in for injured players. Bucs, Sterling Shepard, he's the next guy up on the depth chart, so I'm looking to bet some of his overs, maybe anytime touchdown prop. Even with Tampa Bay being short some pass catchers, I still think we see the Bucs have success in the passing game. Baker Mayfield's production his entire career is heavily related to what type of defensive looks he gets. When he faces teams that run primarily zone coverage, he has ridiculous numbers, including last week. He faced a lot of zone. It's a complete opposite when faced with man coverage. The obvious question is, why doesn't every team just play man coverage versus Baker if he struggles so much against man? The answer there, not every team has the personnel or type of players to successfully play man coverage. You need to have a team that's built or designed around man. Zone is more like the default coverage, and Falcons defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake plays a ton of cover 3 zone. So despite the Bucs likely missing wide receivers McMillan and Palmer, I still think Baker will have success moving the ball against this zone coverage. Before I started recording this video, I was watching a game preview on this game on YouTube. And this guy was talking about how he thinks Baker's going to struggle and showed Baker's numbers from last year in the 2 games versus the Falcons, which Baker did struggle, but you can't even compare the 2 defenses from year to year. Falcons had an entirely different defensive staff last year under defensive coordinator Ryan Nelson, who was the Falcons' DC last year. They ran one of the highest rates of man coverage, which Baker has always struggled against. This year's Falcons defense under Jimmy Lake is almost exclusively zone coverage. Now, of course, Baker could struggle this game. I'm not trying to predict what his performance will be, but history clearly shows he's much better versus zone than man, which does give me a slight lean towards the over. but I am not sure I can bet the over. This is going to be the fourth Thursday night football game that's a divisional matchup. The previous three have all been low-scoring, ugly games. The under is 3-0. Home teams and underdogs are both 2-1 in the previous three divisional Thursday night football games. And the under trend makes sense, too. In divisional games, when you have two teams that are familiar with each other, they can better game plan to stop what the other team likes to do most. But you also add in that short week element. It's less preparation time, and the edge always goes to the defense. It's easier to game plan defensively with less time, where the offense would benefit more from more time. That's why we see defenses ahead of the offenses in preseason and early season. Not a lot of play designs on defense compared to offense. It's basically see ball, go get ball on defense. There's a popular system, and I've talked about this before, and I call it bright lights. It's simply betting against any rookie head coach coaching on Thursday Night Football for the first time. These rookie head coaches are just 5-19 against the spread since the year 2000. Gerard Mayo and the Patriots fit this negative system versus the Jets 2 weeks ago, and they got killed. I bring this up because I've seen people on Twitter mention Raheem Morris in this spot. His entire coaching staff are young, first-time coordinators, but back in 2020, Raheem Morris took over as interim head coach for the Falcons when Dan Quinn got fired after going 0-5 to start the season. The Falcons played a Thursday night game versus Carolina week 8 or 9 that year, I believe. So technically, Raheem Morris has been a head coach on a Thursday night game. So not so sure we can actually call this a system match. But I know some people who are considering this a match, but it's probably just so they can support their narrative on betting the Bucs. These divisional games are always tricky. I think we see this one decided by a field goal or less. I've been back and forth on how to look to play this one. One being the Bucs in a teaser, getting them up and over the key number of 7. Bucs do fit the optimal long teaser strategy, but problem with that is you always have to find another leg to pair it with, which there is no shortage of options this week, so could do that. Besides a Bucs teaser, I think just betting the Falcons on the money line to win at home is the right play. We're getting some line value here based on this line being -3 a week ago. This is the Falcons' third straight home game. I like how they played versus the Chiefs. They played them tough in that loss, and Atlanta's only other loss was their season opener where they were -3 in turnover differential. And technically still only lost by 1 score. Most teams that finish -3 in turnover difference will lose by double digits. Falcons have been good against Todd Bowles since he took over as head coach, too. They're 3-1 versus Bowles. This is probably going to be a game I focus a lot more on props. I've been doing pretty good on primetime game props. Those will be posted in the Discord. Invite link to join is in the description of this video or in my bio, depending on where you're watching this. Any questions, comment below, or let me know who you like in the comment section. Be on the lookout for the Week 5 game breakdowns. I'll have that one up before the weekend. That's all I got for this one. Until next time, good luck with your bets.